Every now and then, my brothers-in-law and I manage to convene for a night of poker. It's not a regular occurrence. In fact, we only pull it off a few times a year. One such occasion arose when our wives planned a joint shopping trip, giving us the perfect opportunity to gather for a few hands. My wife, Anita, has both a sister and a brother. That evening, her brother, David Cooper, invited Paul Marshall to join our game at his place. Dave sat to my left, with Paul directly across from me. Both of them are lawyers at Cooper, Lewis, and Carter, the most successful law firm in our area. Anita's father, George, was one of the original partners. Years ago, he bought out the other two, so now the firm is entirely under Cooper family control. Anita and her sister, Hannah, whom everyone in the family calls Han, are also attorneys. Han married Kevin Russell, a civil engineer who sat to my right during the game. For an engineer, he's a pretty straightforward guy, and I get along with him quite well. As for me, I'm Nathan Lawson, the non-Irish, non-lawyer in the family. These two facts have caused a bit of consternation among my in-laws. If it weren't for Anita's mother, Margaret, who inexplicably took a liking to me, I doubt I could have endured the grief that old George and Dave often dish out. I'm a mason by trade, working with brick, mortar, blocks, and concrete. My father was a mason before me, and I've never wanted to pursue anything else. He insisted I attend school to formally learn the craft. I resisted at first, thinking I could learn everything I needed from him. After all, he could lay block across the entire state and be within a quarter inch of square and level. What more was there to know? It turned out there was plenty. After 2 years of schooling, I joined Dad in his business. Soon enough, I was applying my education to improve the materials and mixtures we used. I modernized and mechanized our operations whenever possible, introducing new, faster methods for building with brick and block. Dad taught me the difference between merely throwing up masonry and true craftsmanship. Together, we figured out how to maintain the quality of our work while completing projects more efficiently. As our business grew, we hired 3 additional men to keep up with the demand. By the time I was 27, I was a partner in a thriving enterprise. That's when I met Anita. We had run into trouble with a supplier who took our deposit but failed to deliver the materials. I went to the Cooper law firm to explore our options. By chance, Anita was assigned to our case. She was 26 and the most stunning woman I'd ever laid eyes on. She handled our lawsuit, and we recovered our money without going to court. By then, I was completely captivated by her. Whenever a payment was late or a delivery delayed, I'd try to convince my father that we needed legal assistance again. "Nathan, for Pete's sake," my father finally exclaimed one afternoon as we were laying blocks for a massive house in the Poconos. "Why don't you just ask that girl out? It'd save me a ton of money and keep me on good terms with our clients and suppliers. We can't sue every Tom, Dick, and Harry just so you have an excuse to see that red-headed lawyer." I was taken aback. How did he know I wanted to see Anita again? Was it that obvious? "You must think I'm oblivious," my father chuckled. "It's clear that girl has you all tied up in knots. I was the same way with your mother, but I didn't need flimsy excuses to see her. I kept after her until she finally agreed to marry me." "But Dad, she's a lawyer," I protested. "I'm just a mason. Why would she be interested in someone like me?" "She won't if you're going to be a hesitant complainer, that's for sure," he retorted. "You have no idea what women really want. I'm no expert, but I know one thing. You're a darn good mason, maybe the best I've ever seen. You never have to apologize for making an honest living with your hands." She probably spends her days surrounded by slick-talking, backstabbing types and is tired of them. Be a man. Ask her out, and don't act like you're not good enough. If she turns you down, try again in a week. It took me 2 months to get your mother to agree to go out with me. The rest of the week was a whirlwind of thoughts centered around my father's advice. It's amusing how time alters our perceptions. At 17, I was convinced he didn't understand anything. Being near him felt like it dulled my own intellect. Yet somehow, in the 10 years since, he had become remarkably wise. By Friday, I had made up my mind. I stationed myself in the parking lot outside Anita's office as the workday ended. Clad in my dusty, sweat-soaked work clothes, I hadn't bothered to go home and clean up. I knew that if I did, my resolve might falter. "Hi there, Anita," I greeted her, perhaps a bit nervously. "I'm not sure if you remember me." She chuckled softly. "Nathan Lawson, right? Of course I remember you. Are you facing more issues with your suppliers?" "Actually, my problem is that I can't get you out of my mind. I confessed, surprising myself with my candor. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me or maybe catch a movie. She raised an eyebrow with a playful grin. Well, I certainly hope you'd take a shower first. It was then that I noticed someone approaching from behind. Turning slightly, I saw a man who bore a striking resemblance to Anita. His smirk gave him away before he even spoke. So, sis, planning a date with this hard-working gentleman? He sneered. Perhaps a gourmet meal at a fast food joint followed by an exhilarating documentary on dam construction, and if he dares to touch you, we'll spot the dusty handprints all over. Realizing this was her brother Dave, from his cutting remarks and familial resemblance, I knew that reacting angrily wouldn't serve me well. His words stung, and for a moment I considered retreating to salvage my pride. But then my father's words echoed in my mind, urging me to stand firm. "Anita, would you like to go out with me?" I repeated, this time with more determination. She glanced between me and her smug brother, then reached out to take my hand. "Walk with me, Nathan. We don't need an audience for this conversation," she said, casting a pointed look at Dave. We strolled away, making our way to a small park nearby. Finding a bench under the shade of a large tree, we sat down. Anita sighed softly before turning to face me. "You've just had the pleasure of meeting my brother Dave," she began, her tone a mix of affection and frustration. "I love him, but he's incredibly snobbish and self-centered, much like my father. Whenever someone shows interest in me or my sister Han, they turn into gatekeepers, determined to drive them away. In their eyes, no one is ever good enough." She paused, her gaze searching mine. "I want you to understand what you'd be getting into by going out with me. Their ridicule and insults can be relentless. I would love to say yes, but I don't want you to endure their torment because of me. If meeting Dave and hearing all this makes you reconsider, I'll understand." I took a deep breath, feeling a surge of confidence. How does 7 o'clock sound? A genuine smile spread across her face. 7 o'clock it is. And so began a courtship filled with obstacles. Her father and brother were, without a doubt, the most challenging individuals I'd ever encountered. They employed every tactic imaginable to discourage me. Snide remarks, cold shoulders, even outright confrontations. But my feelings for Anita were unwavering, and I wasn't about to let them stand in the way. Just over 18 months later, we exchanged vows and became husband and wife. Over time, even George and Dave began to soften, albeit gradually. The arrival of our 2 children, Mary and George, certainly helped to bridge the gap. It's ironic how the son-in-law they once disapproved of became the father of the grandchildren they cherished most. Anita's mother, Margaret, had been my ally from the very beginning. Her warmth and acceptance meant the world to me, and even after 17 years of marriage, she treated me like her own son. Our regular poker games usually included Anita's cousin as the 4th player, but he was unavailable this time around. Instead, Dave had invited his friend Paul to join us. Paul was a wild card, talkative to the point of exhaustion and overly confident in his supposed charm with women. He was also a lingering reminder of Anita's past, having dated her briefly before she went to law school. To put it mildly, he was a constant thorn in my side. Since I moved back to Montrose 6 months ago, I've been with at least 10 different women, Paul bragged unabashedly during the game. 7 of them were married too. There's just something electrifying about being with another man's wife. It really gets the adrenaline pumping. You're courting danger, Paul. Even if someone doesn't confront you directly, you could still find yourself entangled in lawsuits and other legal messes, Kev warned. As a professional, this could seriously tarnish your reputation. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, Paul laughed off the concern. Embracing the bad boy persona actually boosts my business. Men respect me, and women know I'm a powerhouse. They seek me out for advice. One day you might target the wrong woman. She could report you to the boss, Kev cautioned. He wouldn't hesitate to kick you out for harassing a married woman. Old George won't be steering the ship much longer, Paul replied nonchalantly. Dave here will soon take the helm, and he wouldn't entertain unfounded complaints from jealous husbands, right, Dave? I'd support you as much as I could, Paul, but it's wise not to land yourself in that predicament. My sisters will have significant say in the firm's decisions, Dave advised. In that case, I'll just have to win them over, won't I? Paul chuckled smugly. I couldn't hold back any longer. Slamming my cards on the table, I stood up abruptly. I'm done with this game and with this arrogant jerk, I announced. Hey, it's not my fault you can't keep your wife satisfied, Paul retorted. I offer a service for wives who need proper attention, and I bet Anita is one of them. You despicable, worthless scoundrel, I hissed. If you so much as look at Anita the wrong way, you'll regret it. Dave and Kev both rose, trying to calm the situation. That's just Paul's twisted sense of humor, Dave attempted to soothe me. Kev, take it to heart, Nathan. He didn't mean anything by it. Oh, but I did, Paul snarled. You can't expect a bricklayer to understand women or know how to please them. Women are drawn to men of power and sophistication, if he even knows what that means. You pompous fool, I spat back. I've said what I needed to say, and you've been warned. Stay away from Anita. I'm not afraid of you, brick boy. I've decided to take you up on your challenge. I'll have your wife in no time, Paul boasted confidently. She'll forget all about you once I'm through with her. I moved to confront him, but Dave and Kev quickly stepped between us. He's just trying to provoke you, Kev reasoned. You know Anita wouldn't give him a second glance. Don't let his words and your temper get you into trouble. Well, forget you too, Kev, Paul shouted. Just for that, I'll pursue Han as well. I'll show both of them what a real man is like. Paul was practically spitting as he spoke, his eyes darting around like a cornered animal. I found myself placing a hand on Kev's shoulder to hold him back. I wasn't sure he could handle Paul, and if things escalated, I wanted to be the one to deal with him. The game is over, Dave declared firmly. I'm asking both of you, Kev and Nathan, to please leave. We all need to cool off. Recognizing the wisdom in Dave's words, I nodded. It was time to step back and let tempers cool. Besides, it was Dave's house. When a man asks me to leave his home, I respect his wishes. Likewise, I expect the same when I ask someone to leave mine. That's just how I see it. A man's home is his sanctuary. Kev and I turned and made our way to the door. He was still muttering under his breath, and I was no less agitated. Paul was truly insufferable. I decided not to mention the incident to Anita, at least not until things had settled down and I could plan my next move. One thing was certain. Paul would regret any harm or distress he caused my family. By Monday evening, Anita greeted me at the door with a cold beer and a curious expression. I heard you left the poker game early on Saturday night, Nathan. What happened? She inquired, fishing for details. Deception has never been my strong suit. After mulling it over, I concluded that honesty was the best approach with Anita. She's intelligent and capable. I trusted she'd know how to handle Paul. I left early because Dave asked Kev and me to leave, I stated plainly. There's more to it than that, isn't there, Nathan? Anita pressed. You confronted Paul, told him to stay away from me, didn't you? I see it as a warning, not a threat, I replied calmly. No man gets to say he's going to pursue my wife while I'm still around. I'm sure Paul didn't phrase it like that, she countered. He told me you were hostile toward him, thinking you're still jealous because I dated him before meeting you. Dave seems to agree with his version. You overreacted to an innocent comment, didn't you? For some reason, Dave is so taken with Paul that he's not thinking straight, I explained. They both believe your father is nearing retirement and that Dave will soon take over the firm. Paul plans to be his right-hand man and has designs on you and Han, thinking he can charm Dave's sisters and any other woman he fancies. Nathan, that doesn't make sense, Anita insisted. Han and I have significant say in company decisions, and Dave knows that. Paul must be aware of it too. That's exactly why he thinks he needs to win you and Han over, I said. He believes that once he's ingratiated himself with the Cooper sisters, you'll bend to his will for another taste of his so-called allure. He seems convinced your fate is already decided. Nathan, Dave is my brother. He would never condone such behavior from Paul, Anita exclaimed indignantly. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I've never seen you so jealous. Gently lifting her so our faces were level, I gazed into her eyes. I love you more than words can express. But I won't tolerate any betrayal, nor will I stand by while that man tries to harm our family. Kev'd underestimate me. I get that you might think Dave and Paul wouldn't say such things. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, because Dave is your brother and you care about him. Just don't be deceived by Paul's lies. She suddenly laughed, a mischievous glint in her eye. You're quite the strong man holding me like this. Do you think I'm afraid of you, Nathan Lawson? I know you'd never hurt me. The kids are at Mom's tonight, so maybe you should either put me down or prove why I don't need anyone else, if you're up to the challenge. That's how it often was with Anita. She could drive me up the wall with her antics, then effortlessly switch gears and draw me back in. I think it was her way of ensuring she had my full attention while keeping things exciting between us. It always worked. I carried her to the bedroom, determined to show her that I was all the man she'd ever need. At least, That's what I believed. She reinforced my conviction that my love for her couldn't possibly deepen any further. As weeks passed, I noticed Anita rarely mentioned Paul anymore, which unsettled me. She worked with him daily. Why had he disappeared from our conversations? Following the blow-up at the poker game, I grew closer to Kev, my brother-in-law. He was livid that Paul would insinuate Han might be unfaithful. Paul had truly ignited Kev's temper. Whenever we met, we'd discuss Paul, speculating about his schemes and who might be entangled in them. Kev confided that he'd enlisted the help of Donna Palmer, George's secretary, to keep an eye on things. He even shared with her his concerns about the workplace dynamics affecting his wife. Kev quickly realized Donna held no fondness for Paul and was more than willing to assist. So far, Donna hadn't reported anything unusual. The absence of information about Paul's activities made me more anxious rather than relieved. Had he suddenly transformed into a model employee? My instincts told me that people don't change that quickly. I watched Anita closely, making a concerted effort to be more attentive and present. She seemed to appreciate the extra attention, and I was rewarded for it more than once as the nights unfolded. Yet, despite my efforts, a nagging feeling persisted. One evening over dinner, I noticed a distant look in Anita's eyes. "Is everything all right?" I asked gently. She blinked as if snapping out of a trance. "Yes, sorry. Just thinking about a challenging case at work," she replied with a faint smile. I wanted to believe her, but the unease gnawed at me. Determined not to let suspicions fester, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. The well-being of my family was at stake, and I wasn't about to stand by idly. The family was organizing a grand celebration for Margaret and George's 50th wedding anniversary. It was a significant event, and attendance was mandatory for all: children, grandchildren, cousins, nieces, nephews, and even distant relatives. In our Irish family, missing a gathering like this without a doctor's note was simply unheard of. Anita and her sister Han were handling most of the arrangements, with some assistance from their brother Dave and his wife, Julia. Dave had met Julia when she worked at the firm as a temporary employee one summer. Interestingly, no one in the family questioned Julia's background or whether she was a suitable match for Dave, unlike the scrutiny Kev and I faced when we started dating his sisters. Perhaps Julia's last name, Ryan, carried more weight in the Cooper family than Kev's surname, Russell. I never quite understood why that was. The party was set for Friday, July 15th, the exact date George and Margaret had married 50 years ago. In the days leading up to the event, I noticed Anita seemed unusually tense, and her stress only intensified as the date approached. She spent a lot of time at her parents' house and on the phone, meticulously ensuring every detail was perfect. I suppose that's why she's such an excellent lawyer. She anticipates every possible issue, both in the courtroom and in daily life. Around noon on the Friday of the party, I received an unexpected call from Kev. "Nathan, I just heard from Donna," he said urgently. She overheard part of a phone conversation Paul had. He was telling someone to meet him at the Tuckham Inn at 3 p.m. today. I don't know where Han is right now, and if I call her cell, she could tell me she's anywhere. Do you know where Anita is? I know she had some last-minute errands, picking up flowers and things like that, I replied. I'll let the crew know I'm leaving early and swing by the motel before 3. I'll keep you posted on what happens. Wait, I'm coming with you, Kev insisted. I'll be at the coffee shop near my office. Pick me up on your way. The problem was, his office wasn't exactly on the route to the motel, and time was tight. It was already after 2. Picking up Kev would cost precious minutes, but he had included me in this, so I agreed. All right, Kev, just make sure you're ready when I pull up. We can't afford any delays, I said, hanging up and heading to my truck. By the time I picked up Kev in front of the coffee shop, it was 10 minutes to 3. I gave him a quick nod, and we merged back into traffic. We were cutting it close. We pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store adjacent to the motel with just a minute to spare. I chose a spot that offered a clear view of the motel and its rooms. It was an older establishment with about 20 units, all facing the parking area. I turned off the engine. There he is, Kev muttered, pointing. He looks pretty pleased with himself, doesn't he? We watched as Paul, appearing rather cheerful, walked up to one of the rooms. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind him. Kev glanced at me, silently asking what our next move should be. We hadn't really thought this through. Should we confront him? What if he was meeting someone else entirely? What if the person hadn't arrived yet? I don't want to do anything rash and end up in trouble, I said after a moment. Let's wait and see who else shows up. If anything's happening, barging in now won't change it. Exactly, Kev agreed. This probably isn't the first time he's met someone here. I just hope it's not one of our wives. We sat there for about 15 minutes with no activity. Then, Paul emerged from the room, closed the door behind him, and walked back to his car. He drove off quickly, leaving us to wonder what had transpired. A few minutes later, the door opened again, and a woman stepped out. Unbelievable, Kev whispered, as we both recognized Anita hurrying around the side of the building. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. It felt like my world had just been turned upside down. Nathan, let me have Han talk to Anita, Kev pleaded softly. There's no way she actually wants to be with that guy. This must be some horrible mistake. I'm sure she already regrets it. She'll regret it soon enough, I muttered, starting the engine and pulling out of the parking lot. Kev continued trying to calm me down as we drove. When we reached his office, he was still offering words of reassurance. Maybe there's another explanation, he suggested. Let's not jump to conclusions just yet. As Kev was stepping out of the truck, I couldn't hold back any longer. If you were in my shoes, Kev, what would you do? I demanded sharply. He paused, then admitted, I'd probably act impulsively and regret it later. But you're smarter than that, Nathan. Think about the kids, if nothing else. Why didn't Anita think about the kids? I retorted angrily. I'll handle this in my own way. I might not be Irish, but a cold beer always helped me clear my head. I pulled into a local bar and downed a couple of drinks. No brilliant solutions came to mind. I realized I wasn't the cunning type. I dealt with things head on. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was my way. The weight of Anita's importance in my life began to sink in. She was more than just a passionate partner, though she was incredible in that regard. She was my best friend, my anchor. Suddenly I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of confusion. My heart ached like never before. My phone rang. It was Anita. Nathan, where are you? You're supposed to be at Mom's by now. It's after 5 and everyone's wondering where you are, she said, a hint of frustration in her voice. For a moment, I considered telling her off, but thought better of it. Maybe this was the perfect time to let her and her entire family know that I was aware of her betrayal. That would give old George something to talk about. It was too late to change out of my work clothes, but I decided I didn't care. If my appearance bothered the Coopers, so be it. In 10 minutes, I was walking into the backyard of Anita's parents' house. My jaw was set, and my temper was nearing its boiling point. I'd spotted Paul's Mercedes parked out front. This was shaping up to be quite the party. Nathan, let's grab a drink, my treat. Kev called out before I could locate Anita or Paul. It was clear he was trying to intercept me, to calm me down, but I wasn't in the mood. Ignoring him, I continued around the corner of the house. That's when I bumped into Margaret. I'm so glad you made it, she beamed, wrapping her arms around me. It wouldn't have been the same without you. As I leaned down to kiss her cheek, it struck me that Margaret was someone I never wanted to hurt. But the situation was spiraling out of control, and I couldn't prevent the fallout. Over Margaret's shoulder, I spotted Paul by the bar, animatedly telling a story to anyone who'd listen. Gently stepping away from Margaret, I headed straight for him. He noticed me approaching, and the look in my eyes must have signaled trouble. He set his drink down and straightened up as I closed in. I warned you, I said in a low, steady voice. Now it's time to face the consequences. Without warning, his right fist flew out and connected with my chin. My head snapped back, a sharp pain shooting down my neck. I shook it off and fixed him with a cold stare. So, Anita told you everything, Paul sneered. I knew she couldn't keep quiet. As he spoke, he swung again, his fist landing on the left side of my face. The crowd around us fell silent, the only sound the impact of his punches. I wasn't exactly the most beloved member of the Cooper clan, but Anita was cherished. Paul had just insulted her at a family gathering. A grave mistake. Reaching up to rub my cheek, I realized Paul had no idea what he had just unleashed. With a surge of adrenaline, I grabbed him by the lapels of his suit jacket and swung him around, slamming him against the wall of a nearby tool shed. He hit it so hard I wondered if the structure might collapse. I pinned him there with my left hand, pulling back my right fist. This confrontation was about to reach its climax. Nathan! A voice called out sharply from behind me. It was Anita. She hadn't exactly yelled, More like she'd use that tone she saved for the most serious situations. Instinctively, I froze, my right fist still clenched, ready to smash Paul Marshall's smug face. "I'll deal with you later," I growled, my voice rough. "Right now, I've got something to handle." But Anita didn't back down. She stepped right in front of me, pressing her head against the arm that still held Paul in place. "Deal with me later," she shot back, her voice tight. "I don't know what you think you're saying, Nathan, but you'll deal with me now. This asshole just admitted everything, Anita. Not that it matters," I added bitterly. "I saw you leaving that damn motel today." Her reaction was instant, like I'd slapped her. She flinched, but then her chin lifted and she met my eyes head on. "If you honestly believe I'd betray you for this piece of trash or anyone, then you might as well hit me too," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. "Go ahead, Nathan. If I've done what you think I did, I deserve it. Slap me around." I'd never seen Anita like this before, so raw and emotional. Her lip quivered, her voice unsteady as she threw her words at me. She knew me well enough to understand that no matter what, I would never lay a hand on her. And yet, doubt started to creep into my mind. If you trust me, if you love me like I believe you do, you'll let him go and give me a chance to explain. But if I mean that little to you, if you're willing to throw everything away for something you think happened, then fine, hit him. Hit me while you're at it, because any woman who'd cheat on a husband as loyal and devoted as you, Nathan, deserves nothing less. Now I was stuck. Paul was starting to recover, squirming in my grip. If I was going to knock him out, it had to be now. But what if Anita hadn't cheated? What if there was more to the story, some other reason she'd been at that motel? I looked at Anita and realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't give up on her. I couldn't deny her anything. Even after all these years, just being close to her still did something to me. I let Paul go. That's when it happened. Paul swung a wild punch over Anita's shoulder, landing a solid hit on my left eye. I'm a tough guy, but that shot made my knees wobble. I heard Anita swear, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a fight. I'd been in enough brawls to recognize the heavy thuds of fists landing. Anita wrapped her arms around me, steadying me as I staggered back. My left eye was almost swollen shut, but I didn't need perfect vision to see what was happening. Dave Cooper was laying into Paul, his fists flying. Kev and a couple of our cousins rushed over, grabbing Dave and pulling him away before he did any permanent damage. Dave was breathing hard, his face flushed with anger. He ran his hands over his face, trying to calm down. "Get this cowardly bastard out of here," he ordered, his voice shaking with fury. "I don't want to see him for another second, or I won't be responsible for what I do." A few guys grabbed Paul, dragging him off toward the front of the house. Dave put an arm around my shoulder and another around Anita's waist, guiding us back into the kitchen. People stood around, watching through the open door. "Give us a few minutes, would you?" Dave said firmly. Everyone quickly shuffled outside, leaving the three of us alone. Dave closed the door behind them. "Anita," Dave said, his voice softer now, "Julia just told me what you did today, how you stepped in before she made a huge mistake. I'm still furious with her, but I appreciate her honesty. To think I thought that bastard was my friend, all while he was trying to seduce my wife. Thank you, Anita." His voice cracked as he pulled her into a tight hug. I was still dazed from Paul's punch, trying to piece together what had just happened. Did Paul sleep with Julia too? What did Anita have to do with it? Dave let go of Anita and turned to me, extending his hand. Unsure of what else to do, I shook it. "Nathan," Dave said, his tone apologetic. "I'm sorry I didn't listen to you after the card game. I should have gotten rid of Paul back then." "You couldn't have known, Nathan," Dave said, his tone calm but firm. "Anita didn't go there to meet Paul. She went to give Julia a stern talking to, not to sleep with that slime ball. Looks like Julia took her advice and left." Anita stuck around to confront Paul. "Both Han and I saw through Paul's charm offensive," Anita explained. "We'd talked about his little outburst the night you and Kev left your place, Dave. It was tough to keep a straight face around him after that. Then we noticed him turning his attention to Julia. When she left earlier today, I had a bad feeling, so I followed her." "Julia was already gone when Paul showed up," Anita continued. "He and I had a little discussion about his future with the company. He agreed to announce tomorrow that he had found another job out in California and would give his 2 weeks' notice. In exchange, the firm won't pursue him for any number of ethical violations." She sighed. "I had no idea you saw me leaving the motel, Nathan. No wonder you were furious with Paul. Ah, hell, I muttered. I really screwed up this time, Anita. When will I learn to trust you? I embarrassed you in front of everyone, I said, guilt weighing heavy in my voice. I wouldn't worry too much about that, Anita's mother Margaret chimed in, entering the room with Kev, Han, and our 2 kids close behind her. Everyone thought you were about to take Paul's head clean off. If Anita hadn't stepped in, Marshall might be looking for his teeth in the parking lot, and you'd have the cops knocking on your door. Not that I can blame you, Nathan. If anyone insulted my Anita like that, I'd be the same. I'm proud of Anita for marrying you, Margaret continued with a smile, and proud of her for stopping you from doing something you'd regret. I knew you'd calm down the second she got between you and that idiot, she chuckled. I've always had that effect on her father, too. You went all soft the moment she stepped in. You weren't worried about me taking out Paul, Mom? Dave asked, raising an eyebrow. Dave, honey, you're a lawyer, Margaret teased. Your hands aren't exactly weapons. Now, look at Nathan's hands, his chest, and his shoulders. Marshall was in real danger for a moment there. You gave him a few bruises, but he'll be fine in a couple of days. And what about Nathan, Mom? Han chimed in, his eyes swollen shut, and he's got a nasty bruise on his cheek. Any suggestions for that? At Han's words, I realized my left eye was completely closed, and my head was pounding. I hadn't noticed how bad it was until then. Why don't you take your husband upstairs, get his clothes off, and get him in the jacuzzi? Margaret suggested with a grin. I'll send one of the kids up with an ice pack. Then, once he's settled, take off your own clothes and show him how much you love him. Don't worry. We'll still be partying when you get back. Mom! Han shrieked, her face flushing red. Do you have to say that in front of the kids? Oh, don't get all prim and proper with me, Margaret laughed. These kids and all of you grown ones should know the secrets to a 50-year marriage. It certainly isn't by holding back affection, especially when your man's been out there defending the family. Now, go on, Anita, take care of your husband. Less than an hour later, Anita and I were back at the party, mingling with the guests. It seemed like everyone had heard Margaret's advice on marriage and teased us about making sure ours lasted. I have to admit, though, Margaret might just be onto something.